Hello again. This is Chad Everett Broshears. I'm the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. And today I'm going to cover another subject of why not? It's always beautiful whenever you actually have a real life experience you can speak from and when it's fresh. Whenever it's really right there, it's tangible. Something you can really you can hold on to. It's so tangible to you. That's today's episode. So you're going to hear some emotional energy in today. Why not? That's what exactly what this channel has been designed for. It is for what's real for us. It's for no one was really there to show us how to do this thing we call life. No one was really there to fully guide us. A lot of us had a lot of authorities, but to be a completely well-rounded human being takes something. It means you can't over-focus in one area for too long and neglect others. It means it takes time. It takes effort. You have to want to develop yourself. You have to want for you. So our authorities that we most of the time default to, we find that we just accept what their experiences are as what their reality's truth is, like as a whole, an absolute truth. Other people will experience it this way. We just accept it. We grant that permission because we don't know any better. We're at such a young stage for most of us. When we start identifying our authorities because they are the ones that help us have life. They're the ones that make us ensure for us that we don't go without. These are the people that will just give and grant certain permissions and privileges that we may not necessarily in our adult years would allow somebody else to so easily give us, or to so easily just grant them permission to tell you how life is supposed to be. You had no defenses in these early stages. None of us really did. I know I didn't. So we learn to develop ourselves a certain way. We adopt a lot of the characteristics and traits of these individuals that we're learning by. We develop traits like how to show love, how to accept love, how to be in a relationship, how to not be in a relationship, how to deal with the loss of a relationship. How to deal with the excitement of getting started in a relationship. We deal with a lot of these interesting things, and we don't even know we're doing it. We just do it. We feel it. We don't understand why we keep dating similar people, why we keep having similar breakdowns. We look at it as if it's our choice, but yet, is it really your choice to stop a relationship the way that you do? Was it really you, or is it an inheritance? Not necessarily the genetic sense, but a lot of the times I would say that would be a likely truth. I know in my situation that is a truth. It's more of a genetic sense, meaning that my father had a great deal of influence on myself. My father had a lot of influence on my brothers. My brothers mimicked behaviors similar to my father and my mother, and who they identified with on a social level, and who they wanted to model themselves after. Whoever would identify closest to what they were dealing with. And then they just would be. And then I myself, being the second to youngest of 6 boys, Found myself identifying with not only my parents, but my brothers. Yeah, I got pretty deep pretty quick, I suppose, in this exploration. My brothers, great people. My father, my mother, they're great people. When we get challenged in a certain area, we revert to the safest platform for us to survive. Now, if you're well developed in a certain area and you're challenged in that area, you don't revert far back. You revert to what is the most comfortably sound place to make a really rational decision. But if you're well underdeveloped, you choose an emotional decision, which can have you behave like an 8-year-old and not like a 36-year-old man. We've got a lot of interesting little nuances that we really put little thought into. We don't put a lot of thought into how we or why we behave a certain way. We go through our lives on a day-to-day basis and we act as if we have the freedom of choice over free will. A lot of the things that have us calculate a decision are not really free to us to calculate. They're the same as a mathematical equation in a sense. You're taught math. Once you're proven that you actually know how to utilize a specific formula, now your formula matches other people and it can be tested. You see, we don't really have a basis to test our formulas against other people, but yet you do have a great deal of experience that's caused you to calculate your actions, which is the best course of action to survive as most intact that you can in this situation. We have a lot of opportunities that present themselves. The most common experience I have, and I have very little experience in a certain thing, like flying an airplane for the very first time, or being in an airplane for the very first time, not flying it, but being a passenger, scared the life out of me. I recall it as if it were yesterday. My mother and I standing at the airport, watching the plane get connected with the walkway. And we were flying up to Indiana. I was so scared. When I say flying up to Indiana, I was flying out of Tampa with my mother. And it was Southwest Airlines. No assigned seating. You get on that cattle car and you find the best seats. I was scared to death to get on that plane because I had no experience in what it was like to be in air and flying, fallen many times, jumped, done a lot of things, but nothing that was an actual machine, such as an airplane or a jet. Nothing like that. So I got on this plane scared to death because I had no understanding about how this experience should be, but I've heard it. Other people told me how it was supposed to be. I watched it on television. I've seen it in literature. I've had the experiences through someone else vicariously, but not really the surreal experience, the actual experience of it. So I boarded the plane. I believed that the pilot would do his best. I knew that there was a lot of instances that planes didn't quite make their destinations with the most unfavorable options or opportunities that came out of it. Not that the statistics were truly that high, but fear doesn't wait. It doesn't wait to measure the highest level of statistics. Fear jumps in. It hijacks you. It has you take the greatest course of action for the intention of survival. And you do that as quick as you can when you're disarmed with experience or you're disarmed of experience. Now, I hope this analogy, and I hope that you're following this analogy and how this actually works out with the human being, how we actually experience relationships. And whenever relationships take dives, what that must be like. What is your default position? Where do you go? when a relationship isn't going the direction you want it to. I know from personal experience where I go, people think that because I have some enlightened perspective on life, that I have this interestingly wise place for being very. I don't necessarily agree, but I've heard this from many people. They think that I would be the answer to their problems if they were just in a relationship with me. Whenever I actually join into a relationship with somebody and they feel that I'm the answer, but I don't necessarily know it right away, but it kind of shows its truth in time, I find that I'm more likely to become the idea, or the person sees me as an idea rather than a person. They fall in love quickly with the idea of me. They're not really who I am. How this shows itself as an inevitable truth is the idea of me, is what you hear about me. It's what you observe in my actions, but it's not necessarily fully understanding all of my actions. It's not understanding the truth of my character as much as what you want me to be for you. It's the idea of me. A lot of people fall in love with the idea of me. Hell, I've fallen in love with the idea of a lot of people in my life. I've fallen in love many times with the idea of another person. It's just such an interesting phenomenon to understand that there is an idea of you that somebody can fall in love with, but it not be you. It's an interesting thing. So, as you can tell, that's today's episode, right? It's like breakups. Whenever you realize that it's not going the direction you want it to go in, and you take mature actions in order to create what you want. And when I say you take mature actions to create what you want, we do have the privilege of creating mature actions, such as we could sit down with our partner after fully understanding who we are as the I of who we are. And I mean I as in the letter I, the possession of self, I. Like when you can be that I person and you understand who you are as an I, as an individual, as who you are for yourself, then you have the privilege of understanding something interesting and new. But yet it seems so old and comfortable. But you can express it differently to your partner once you fully understand that. This is in my series that I actually teach for developing the self, developing yourself, mastery, your own development. I teach this as first understanding, and I learned this from a wonderfully brilliant person, very interested in life, such as many people that I adore. And the beginning stages of this is understanding your I value, who you are to you. What do you need to do for you in order to take care of you, in order to make the progress in your life that you wish to make for yourself? What is your I value to go to bed? What time? How much sleep do you need in order to achieve your dreams? How much you do you need in order to achieve your dreams? How much knowledge do you need to achieve your dreams? What kind of food do you need in order to achieve your dreams? What kind of recreational self-time do you need to achieve these things? What is your recreational self-time? What is your time with you? What do you need to do for you to love you so that no one else needs to fill the void? So you don't have to go from relationship to relationship seeking out another person to fill the emptiness that you cradled, that you've chosen to keep. This is how you actually fill that void. You have to understand who you are to yourself. You have to understand who you are in order to achieve what you want to achieve in your life. These are your I values. If there's a recreational thing like maybe playing the tuba, or something of that nature, what do you have to do for you to do that? Like, in order for you to really get the fulfillment of doing something for yourself, the last time you did something for you and you felt really fulfilled, you felt really good about what you did for you. This is a necessity in a relationship. You need to have this in order to achieve what you want to achieve without so much upset. Now, I'm not saying that you won't have upset as you go through life, utilizing these understandings, these principal understandings. I am saying that it does start to minimize things. It gives you the privilege to be able to get out of it and out of the uncomfortable side of the situation. Not necessarily out of it as if you're out from underneath a bench press or something, right? Or you're out from underneath something completely. You just remove the emotional upset that's unnecessary to achieve what you want to achieve. Now, I'm not saying that you should deny yourself these emotions. You should experience these emotions. They're a wonderful thing. Every emotion that we can qualify in language is a wonderful thing. It's an expression of who you are. It's an expression of your experience. It's a beautiful thing to know that we can communicate it in words. So if you say the word wrath, what do you hear with wrath? What occurs to you with the word wrath? Right? Most people spend their time avoiding these things. The optimists, at times, I'm not saying all optimists. I refuse to put anyone's on Noah's Ark like that. But I do mean that there's a good deal of optimists that deny themselves the unpleasant experiences because they don't allow them to stay hooked on happy, the high of happy. I find that our work shows up for us whenever the emotions that are unpleasant show up. Our work shows up that if you want to fix being high and happy more frequently, you've got work to do when the negatives show up, or the undesirables, or the I'm under pressure experiences come up. You get the privilege of knowing where your work is, as long as you accept that you feel a certain way. Now you see, hopefully you can see how I'm kind of tracing out the sandbox at this point, the sandbox of the conversation. The sandbox is what relationships are in a sense of. Because I don't have enough time at this moment to really go through all of what I think a relationship is. But I do have enough time right now and the real experience to know what a relationship is whenever it's ending. It's real. It's tangible. It's right there. You can touch it. So the sandbox has been drawn out in the sand, right? You understand that there are some parameters at this moment. Most enter into relationships without understanding their I values. Who are you to you? Most do this. I myself have done this many times. Wisdom can be defined as knowledge that can help you offset an experience or to help you acquire an experience. You can call that wisdom. You can actually say that wisdom is knowledge in action. Knowledge isn't power. Knowledge requires action to be power. Otherwise, knowledge is novelty. You need to do something with it. Otherwise, it's wasted space until it's used. So, we've drawn out our line in the sand. You know what box I'm playing in today. Yeah, it's hitting me actually, the heaviness of the situation, of understanding that there were certain things that I actually knowingly stepped over in the beginnings of this particular relationship. I stepped over doing my high values with her. It's kind of like you either plant something that you intend to grow, or weeds will grow wild on their own. Has your relationship become something purposely created, planted, maintained, well kept, cared for, acknowledged, loved? Or was it something that you just marked out a plot of land and allowed the weeds to just do what they do? It's not that weeds are ugly. Weeds can bring a sense of adventure. They can bring a sense of the unknown that makes an excitement. Not to say that understanding what you're creating takes away your excitement, but it is to say that excitement has a level of fear attached to it, that it might not work, you might not survive intact. You don't jump out of a plane with a parachute for the day-to-day experience of just doing it, jumping out of a plane. Jump out with the surreal experience that life may not actually work out in the next 6 minutes or less. Or less. You jump out of a plane and you've prepared, you've packed your chute, or someone else is qualified to have. You've done everything that's necessary in order to achieve the end result that you're looking for. But if it was 100% safe to the experience, that there was no possibility that it could fail, and that something really wouldn't come out of it, you start to lose a little bit of an edge. You can learn this as a truth if you know anybody who is a seasoned professional skydiver. The first time they jumped was a hell of a lot more exciting than the 100th or the 1000th time. So that 1000th time is a time whenever it's been consistent that they've done it 999 times prior successfully. Still brings a sense of excitement, but it's not the same as it was the first time. See, that's the sum of the benefits of the weeds. Some of the benefits of not necessarily doing the work when getting into a relationship. But you see, for every peak has a valley. I personally modeled the desire. Now, I'm not saying I modeled my relationships. I modeled my desire. I hope you understand what that means and the difference between the two. Modeling your desire is something that you wish to experience out of somebody else's behavior, something that you witness other people do. Whether it's 100% true or not, it's you as the witness and the level of knowledge you have about that person's ability to do that thing. Whatever it is, I modeled my desire for a relationship after my grandparents on my mother's side. They had the kind of relationship that it was almost spooky. How when my grandfather would just walk in the door, not make a sound, and you could see my grandmother, wherever she was, in this example, we'll say she's washing dishes in the kitchen, and my grandfather would walk in the front door, completely soundless, and she would just smile. You can just see how content and happy and joyful that the man she loved was home. My grandfather as well, he was a very stern man. He was actually one of the very first Secret Servicemen for the presidents. I forgot which president it was, but he was one of the very first Secret Servicemen. And he had an intimate relationship with the president that he served. And I had to actually look that up so I can honor that memory. But he was a very stern man. He was quiet most of the time. If he raised his voice, your heart would jump out of your chest. I desperately sought out his approval, just so I would not have to hear that. I would not have to suffer his wrath. But whenever my grandmother would come around, That man was the softest. He was so wonderfully soft. So I modeled my desire by my grandparents. Now, as I've gotten older, I've realized by the stories that my family has shared about my grandparents on my mother's side, I've realized that a lot of those people, a lot of the family members that had witnessed it said that it wasn't quite what I thought it was. They said that actually, Chad, it's not the same as what you think it is. It's not every time they walk into the room together, they both smile. My mother shared this with me and said, Chad, they didn't do that all the time. Now, I spent more than 15 years in the idea that that's the way a relationship, a truly healthy, wonderful, desirable, life-fulfilled relationship is going to be. And I spent a lot of that time constructing my beliefs, the very impressionable years. And to only find out in my latter part of my 20s from my mother is that no, they hardly ever talked to each other. They hardly ever spoke. They only fought 2 times that anyone could recall at both of their funerals. They only had 2 times that anyone could possibly recall, to the best of my knowledge. And I listened with absolute attention when they talked about the way that my grandparents were to each other, because it was so detrimental to the way that I thought the relationships were supposed to be. So as soon as they mentioned something, it didn't matter what I was doing, I was paying attention. I wanted to be one of those successful relationships, the person that would only be married once and would absolutely just be the hallmark idea of in love with my partner. So I listened. My family told me stories that my grandparents, on my mother's side again, that they really didn't have the exciting life that most people look for. They had more of this mediocre, quiet, sitting down in the living room, eating TV or eating dinner on TV trays, watching television, never really speaking much to each other. Now, of course, they loved each other, but they were the well-manicured garden that lacked a lot of excitement. They come from a different school, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you can't create the relationship you want now. But I started relationships this way. I became habit-ridden with relationships this way. The kind of idea that relationships are supposed to be a certain way. So I really reinforced this. I got into my early relationships in my teens, in my 20s. And if it didn't go the way that I thought it should go by the pattern of desire that I had, the desire pattern, then I decided that it wasn't working. I didn't put the work in because I felt that there was this idea that when you're with the right person, it all works out perfectly. I don't believe that at this point. But believe me, ladies and gentlemen, it took me time to understand. So now I'll bring it back to present day. So you understand a little bit about why this show is called Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. We don't really have a uniform format that we learn how to do life in. We learn it through different experiences, most of which are inherited experiences. Then we have our own personal experiences, but how do you have a personal experience and not have an inherited experience to go with it? The skydiving example earlier was a pretty close one for that, though. It's hard to understand what it's like to jump out of a plane if you've never done it. On a very real thing that most people can relate to, because not everyone's jumped out of a plane, but a very large percentage of people have ridden a bike. Prior to being able to ride a bike, if you can recall back what it took to start riding a bike, people could tell you all day long what it's like to ride a bike, but you don't know what it's like until you do it. You can fully understand what it takes to balance, but you don't know how to balance until you've done it. But you can go through all the acts of physics and everything that and the curriculum of physics could bring, the study of physics can bring to you. You can do all of that, but you can't really know it. It's an experiential thing. You can't know it until you do it. And it's the same thing for relationships. If you go into it with this inherited belief a relationship's supposed to be a certain way, which most people do, when I do my relationship conversations and development with people, in which I do regularly, I have conversations with them first before they ask me. When they ask me, what do I do next? How do I have that relationship I want? The first question I ask them is, what's your idea of success with this relationship? What is your model of desire, or the desire model that you have for a relationship? Now, what is your experience level of a relationship? Once I understand these things, I can actually start to understand how to put together a path, how to construct an ability to achieve a specific goal. But until I know that, I'm kind of injecting my own position. Not everybody wants the relationship I do. I've since revised my view of a relationship. I don't want my grandparents' relationship. I would love to know that my partner, as soon as I walk through the door, smiles because she knows I'm home. Or I smile whenever she walks through the door because I know the love that I really want in my life is right there. Of course I want that. But I also want excitement. I want some weeds in my garden. Not a lot. I don't want my garden to be nothing but weeds. That's just too much hardship for me. And by that I mean hardship in the sense of distractions. I'm playing a big game with my life. I spend a lot of time structuring and strategizing this big game of my life. I don't want too many distractions. But of course, I want that adventure as well. I want that comfort of knowing that that person's going to be there. But when we don't know, it's safer, it's comfortable. So with all of this, we have many ways of having relationships. Relationships fall into a category like common sense. Nothing will stop me faster in a conversation, redirect, and get more information than when somebody drops that little bomb called common sense. Whenever somebody says, don't you know that this is the way it's supposed to be? It's common sense. I say, common sense is relative to the demographic that you're in, and only to the level of experience that demographic has had. If you live in a fishing community, common sense about fishing is different than if you live inland, where you don't even have the opportunity to fish. If there's no bodies of water, your level of common sense in that scenario, if you're inland and you're out going towards, if you're one of those people from the inland and you go out to the say the ocean or a river or lake area where the community is well versed in what it takes, you may be accused of not having common sense. Common sense is relative, folks. It really is. So when somebody says common sense, or you know how a relationship is supposed to go, I really do put brakes on that conversation just enough so I can understand them. So I can look at it and say, I don't know how your relationship is supposed to go. Hell, most of the time, I don't know how my relationship's supposed to go. I know how I want it to. But your partner brings that sense of adventure when you're discovering that person in all of the facets. And I don't mean just discovering that person in the physical, emotional, psychological sense, and the safety and security of a bedroom or something, or over tea at the dinner table. I mean that level of understanding who that person is when they're under extreme stress, who that person is whenever they're in joy, whenever they're in that moment of happy, when they win a lottery ticket of $1,000 or more, who that person is, or when they get a big promotion, or whenever they lose their job. You see, we base a lot of our beliefs on the way people are supposed to behave, not cognitively necessarily, but subconsciously. We base a lot of our beliefs off of an experience we've had with that person. We try to lock them in time. Remember when we first started dating? It was an interesting thing when we first started dating. Sex was wow. The times were exciting. The exploration of you and all of you, your body, your mind, the conversations we had, all of it was just astonishing. Then we go to our day-to-day lives, what we find that's supposed to be important as time goes on. We have certain priorities that take precedence again. Well, we might actually neglect our partner if our partner believes that we're supposed to be the way we were when we first started. But yet you're buckling down now. Personal experience, right? I started buckling down. We talked about how our family was going to be created, what we needed to have that. What kind of work was going to be necessary wasn't spoken about. But we did talk about what we wanted, not necessarily the full reality of what we wanted. You see, I had left a field that I worked in for 9.5 years. And for the listeners that don't necessarily know me, I spent 9.5 years in the power generation and distribution fields. I worked in power plants. I worked in plant operations. I worked in nuclear plants to coal plants and oil and actually I didn't work in coal plants, but I did work in oil. That's a tongue twister, right? And oil and gas, natural gas. I worked in different fields. It's an education I really don't want to utilize as its entirety intact as being an operator for a power plant again. It's a good deal of money, but what you have to trade, in my experience, is not something I'm willing to trade for my life. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, and by all means, anyone who listens to this that actually works in those fields, kudos to you. You outlasted me, my friends. But you see, we never actually, to finish that thought, I actually, since I'm in a different position now, I work in making people's lives different. Now, of course, I have my company where I do what I'm doing right now. And I do what I do whenever I'm working one-on-one with people and developing them, or helping them develop, or developing a team, or a culture, society. I also have a limited skill set in what I do most of the time while this is still growing. It's a very limited skill set. I actually own my own personal training company. It's actually a holistic personal training company I called Go Figure Holistic Personal Training. And there was an administrative side that I was very weak in. I didn't realize how weak I was. I was really good as a trainer, holistically minded. I just absolutely sponge up as much knowledge as I possibly can. I love learning, and I love offering knowledge, teaching. But I was poor and weak in the side of, and I don't mean poor and weak, just in the sense there was something wrong. I was just underdeveloped in the side of the administrative, the management side of it. So I took a job doing that. And as our relationship with this woman, myself and her, was continuing to bloom, and we talked about having children, and that was one of our deep desires, to have children together. And to really just this is our family. We're not boyfriend and girlfriend anymore. Okay. So whenever money was a little tighter than we really wanted, in my limited skill set, I buckled down. I kept, as I like to say, I kept my head down. I just kept my nose to the ground and kept pushing. Pushed as hard as I could, long hours. little pay, long hours, regularly. You see, that was my transition to help provide for the relationship that we wanted to have. And there was a good deal of things, not to offset the responsibility, but there was a good deal of things that were anticipated that they continued to be as they were in the earlier stages. The attentiveness that she requested and she required. And then there was myself. When I'd get home after long hours and spend 30 to 45 minutes with her before we go to bed, because I worked those kind of long hours. I hear all of her concerns. You're not home. We don't have enough money. The only thing I knew to do was to keep my nose down to the ground and push. It's the only thing I knew to do, which required more of my attention and time, which actually further suffocated the relationship to the extent because I wasn't attentive. So I wasn't as attentive to her. Now, how can you measure that? Now, on its own, you can just say, I get what you're talking about, but I want to try to create a deeper level of getting what I'm talking about. She had an expectation the relationship would continue at a younger stage, whenever we were still finding the weeds and kind of pulling them out and having fun with those weeds in the beginning, right? The excitement, the adventure of learning one another and developing what we wanted to develop. And then there was, I became momentarily obsessed with creating the financial life for both of us. And as I transitioned into that position, and her desire stayed high that I be who I was at the beginning with all of that excitement and adventure, and my level of energy and availability was so low at the end of the day that I really only had enough time to just spend 30 to 40 minutes. But she got the exhaust of me as I worked so diligently to create that life for us. She's not wrong, and neither am I. But you see, these are the divisions that happen in our lives. As men, we're socially conditioned to really push to make a living for the family. Now, of course, women are coming up quickly in this, and you're getting a larger demographic now than ever, with women taking higher pay levels in the workforces, getting higher level positions, and really just being more of a power position. And I'm absolutely, absolutely happy to see it happen. But we're just socially conditioned to a great deal, and I don't mean as an absolutism, but I do mean as a level of truth, that we're conditioned to behave a certain way because that's just the way that we've been conditioned to do. You've seen it out there where people say a real man or a real woman, a good woman, a good man, has a specific characteristic or a specific trait. So we have a lot of these conditionings that take place in life. And then we kind of default to that. I'm taking that back. We don't we default there. I know I default there. I took on the level of honesty at a young age. I was accused a couple of times in my youth that I lied. And I just felt like I was less of a person if I was known as being a liar. So I really put a lot of effort into constructing my being, my who I am now person, into being an honest person known for honesty. So you see, we have a lot of these default places. A lot of them. It's not a handful. If you were to really sit back and kind of analyze who you are, you'd start to recognize a lot of these things that are not really, they weren't there genetically as what your parents gave you through your genes. They were there inherently by how your parents or your authorities behaved, how the people you idolized behaved. You mimicked after a certain set of people. You can look at our society now, in the 70s when I was born, the 80s when my youngest brother was born, the 90s when Jerry Springer generations really get started, right? You can see how the generations have changed. People's behaviors have changed. Those are inherited values. Those are social inherited values. Those are parental and authority inherited values, because everything changes. The only thing that stays constant is change. We go into relationships with all of these presuppositions, these positions that there's a certain way things are supposed to be. We go into so many relationships with that. And then whenever we bump heads with people, we usually seek out who's going to be the victim and who's going to be the victor or the villain. Rather than understand who you're in a relationship with first with yourself and then the other person. So now that I've really put the grains of sand into the sandbox of what I'm calling relationships, now to the what hurts about relationships ending, the breakups. Some people default indifference, which is one I'm guilty of. My father was good at it. Whenever he was truly emotionally hit, he went more indifferent. But whenever he wasn't quite as emotionally hit, he seemed like it. He was a very charming and charismatic man. He spent a lot of time learning how to manipulate people. Not viciously, but just enough to get his way. But not in the sense of wanting to truly create a great deal of harm, less than just a little bit of emotional harm, giving him privilege of getting his way. Not like he conned people out of money or any kind of possessions or had them overcommit to anything that would just be lifelong detrimental. He was just very charismatic, charming. And when that showed up, I learned in the looking glass that was his level of insincerity. But when he was sincere, he was more indifferent. He removed himself. I defaulted this because it was early for me. It's hard to remove a default. It's what you do when you realize a default's in play. That either empowers you or disempowers, right? It removes your ability. So that's part of the juggernaut that enters a relationship whenever I get there. Stern? Oh, you better believe it. Thick-headed? Yes. Compassionate? Absolutely, whenever I get the initial me out of the way. I hope you caught that. There's always an initial you. I mentioned it earlier by your level of experience and how you know to deal with something. There's a default way that you be. You get that out of the way, and then you have the ability to make workability. The more you practice this, the faster you get workability in the relationship. I am not an advocate for suffocation of self-expression. I believe self-expression is one of the most powerfully healthy things that you can do. But I always caution to be responsible with it. So I am no easy person to date. Sometimes I'm so real that it's uncomfortable. Sometimes I'm cold. Sometimes I default that indifference. And I'm so caught up in being on it or being in it that I don't want out. Therefore, if you're caught in that juggernaut, if you're caught in the path of that thing, I hope you've got thick skin. And I don't mean thick skin in the sense that I lash out. You can imagine what it's like to meet a wall that has no expression. When I'm emotionally overwhelmed, that's a default position. I don't fault myself or my father for it. I take responsibility. It depends on what kind of stressor it is. My level of experience with dealing with that stressor and what I have created as workability to get out of that thing. That's what matters. That's what power, that's where power can come from. So, breakups. Yeah, they can be hard. I'm on the latter side of the demonstration. And why does it sometimes seem easy for people to break up? This last relationship brought a lot of life to my emotions. Now, there was a perfect opportunity that came along, like just the level of education experiences that I've had up until that point, and what was the most fresh in my knowledge and my experience, which ushered in this level of deeper penetration for the other person into my life, into my intimacy. As a friend of mine says, that we've learned from a mentor that we both share. Intimacy. Into you I see, or into me I see, depending on the direction. Something I want to get out of the way real quick, and then I'll get back on this, and then I'm going to complete the video, is when you you get into a relationship, you're looking for love, in the sense that this partner is that partner for you. You're going to be with this person. You're looking for love. Almost certainly. To what degree and what expression and how you define it is what actually makes a difference. When was the last time you actually approached a relationship, and before you actually agreed to be in that relationship with that person, you actually stopped and said, what do you define love as? Because I'm so interested in how you define love. I define love as, right? And you put your definition of what love is. Love is one of the most commonly sought after things. Money's right there with it. But love is constantly sought after. You could be rich or poor and you seek out love. But how many people have a well-defined definition of love? So if you would do yourself the favor before you enter into another relationship, or the next time you see the person that you absolutely feel you love, treat them with a definition. Get to your clarity about what love is. I'll share with you what my definition of love is, but it's my definition. You need to know yours. My definition of love is acceptance. The more in love I am with someone, the more I accept them. The more I accept them, the deeper they get in with me emotionally. So when they have bad days, I feel a bad day with them. My compassion lines accordingly. Whenever that person is having the joy that they can have that day, I feel the joy with them. My downfall in all this relationship was that I didn't necessarily share the experiences, and I was temporarily distracted by keeping my head down and pushing forward. But love, acceptance. I knew whenever my partner was having a bad day that it could really get me emotionally. And sometimes I purposely pulled away. because the level of attention I needed to create for the relationship so that we can move forward financially with our lives required that I paid attention and was not distracted. So I would listen with half of an ear, only somewhat of the level that she needed me to hear her at, especially with her still wanting me to love her as I did in the beginning, or expressed my love in the beginning. Can you see by the way that I'm expressing this that the indifferent side isn't necessarily fully indifferent? It's just a stone wall that resists allowing others in enough so that an idea can survive. I needed the idea of our financial future to survive, and she needed the idea of the way that I loved her in the beginning, the way I expressed my love to her in the beginning survived. And they met an impasse. She was reactive with pain. And then she took my trait and went indifferent with me. She slowly stopped expressing herself so much that I felt that there was a relief there, because it felt as if she was starting to get the plight that I was in. I expressed regularly that my job was stressing me out. I'd have chest pains at how much stress I was under and how long I was working for, and everything I felt I needed to do to create our lives. I'd express it as articulately as I could without necessarily empathetically connecting, but cognitively attempting. So she started getting more indifferent like I was, and I took that as a wonderful thing, and that I felt that she was starting to get me. And the level of truth is that somebody else was getting her. I don't blame her. Sometimes we have these impasses. The beautiful thing about what I intended with this, and I'll say that it's a beautiful thing without imposing too much of my own personal arrogance and hubris, is that through this, if you've listened from beginning to end, you might find workability in my experience. You might be able to model, you might have a desire model that can come out of this. You could desire to have your relationships be so well known to you that you can still have the excitement of having leads in the relationship, but have it so well manicured that everyone would say that's a beautiful garden. And oh, how I wish that I could have a garden like that. You could look at the way that somebody else would want to be in that relationship with your partner as being they see something they want but yet haven't had with that person you're in a relationship with. But if you're not an attentive gardener and you allow somebody else to be attentive, then you can be in the same spot. Now, for everything that we do, you must know that it takes practice, it takes time, it takes patience, it takes compassion for yourself before you can really dismiss that being possible. Because you start it and you lose something or you miss something. And you say, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe this technology that I'm learning, this wetware download that I'm getting from Jed, isn't functional, doesn't work. It's a utopic viewpoint. Perhaps you feel that way. Or maybe you're seeing a possibility out of it. Practice will give the opportunity to develop. If you don't practice, then it's like somebody telling you how to ride a bike and then you telling everybody else you got it. I know how to ride that until it's time that you prove it. Then you find out how well you really don't know how to ride that bike. Life is an experiential thing. You can't really get life in a laboratory as you do in the wild. You get a type of life. You don't really get the fullness of life. Now, I've droned on for a bit about this, and I hope that you get the other side of what relationships are and the painful side of a breakup, just simply by my expression of what indifference can be, the unscathed view. The other thing that adds so much excitement, or let's say emotional excitement, the emotional upheaval, the heartache of a relationship ending, is that there were a degree of promises that were spoken and unspoken, that the relationship was going to go a certain way. And if that relationship did not meet those promises, there's something painful that takes place because you're attached to an outcome that isn't likely coming to fruition with that person now. It's the same as whenever somebody promised you a good Christmas present and you found out that they didn't give it to you. There's a lot of analogies I could use there, but I think that's a pretty powerful one. We do have a large degree of attachments that we impose on our partner that are not spoken. And whenever the relationship doesn't work out, people seek vengeance at times or vindication that somebody wasn't right in the relationship. And then we get conditioned by the people around us, or by our past experiences, or by the way that we've expressed ourselves in the past. We get conditioned in such a way that we just instantly try to drag the other person through the mud. Or we make ourselves this horrible person that we're really not. But it's the best story that fits the narrative. It's the best story that fits the narrative at the moment. That story will dissipate in time. That narrative will die out for that particular experience. But it waits, subtly waits for the next opportunity to come into play. Now, of course, this conversation could continue on, but without having a participant in the conversation. This is just listening to me explore and dictate my experience, my viewpoints, and my introspections. So, at the risk of running over too long, I'm going to go ahead and close out this video, or this particular episode. I hope that this has been insightful for you. I hope that it's brought a degree of experience and learning that can give you a breath of fresh air in a relationship. Or if this one that you're in is ending, perhaps you can end it on such a note that it's not the other person would want you again as much as it is that you're leaving the relationship in such a way you're honoring, or you're starting a new relationship and it's an opportunity to create it such a way that you would want your grandkids to try to model, desire models, model desires after. It's up to you, folks. Your legacy is the story of your life that others share about you. Is your life story worth sharing? At what time is someone stricken with the desire to share a story from your life as an example for someone else to possibly get someplace else. Inspiration. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, I'll close. I hope that this recording and this episode has brought a degree of curiosity that might actually bring in a whole new experience, that might give you a different type of relationship, maybe a relationship closer to what you've actually wanted. With that, thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to share this wherever, however, and whenever you like. I'm always looking forward to your feedback. Please subscribe to the channel. Share it with your friends. Encourage them to subscribe. I'm always tickled pink whenever I see a new subscriber. I love that people actually care about what I have to say and that they share their life's experiences with me as well. Sharing is caring, folks. Unless your relationship is exclusive, of course. Then don't share that shit. Not like that. All right. By the way, I'm not saying that the only kind of relationships are those that are monogamous and exclusive. Your relationship is your call. It's not other people's opinions. It's not what other people view as what is right or wrong. That's all on you. Your relationships are yours, baby. All right, guys. This is Chad Everett Brochures. I am the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. Look for more of my things in the future, some of my programs, some of my literature, some of the videos that will help develop you into the person that you know you are, or at least bring that enlightenment to who you really are, to yourself and to others, and to what your future self can be. Thank you so much. This is Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. This is Breakups, the Valentines special. All right, guys. Have a great night.